All right, I'm going to go over 19.3, which is on algae or the plant-like protists. So the one thing about the plant-like protists is that they are photosynthetic. That's how they get their food. So they have to have a primary pigment, and that is called chlorophyll. So you see that as usually like a yellow-green or a blue-green in the algae. And then they have to have a secondary pigment, which actually allows them to absorb the light energy if they are a deep water protist. Okay, for example, deep in the ocean. So the two major kinds we have are green algae, which is to your right, and the red algae, which is to your left on the screen. We also have a type of plant-like protist called diatoms. These actually look like kind of broken glass. They're unicellular. They are in the phylum Bacillariophyta, and they are photosynthetic, and they are autotrophic, right? So they're also photosynthesizing. They have all different sorts of structures, okay, but they are very pretty and they look very glass-like. Also, these diatoms have asexual reproduction, right? When these two separated halves, right, become new halves, so they kind of split apart, and so the new half can fit inside the old one. And so the new diatom is about 1/4 of the original size, and then it has sexual reproduction. Is triggered usually by the environment or something internal, and then the gametes are produced. So here we have a picture, excuse me, as I'm losing my voice. I've been talking too much, I guess, of both asexual and sexual reproduction. Here where we have the sexual reproduction starts with meiosis, and you have the formation of gametes that fuse to make a zygote. And then it goes through mitosis, right? So it has that wall formation around that zygote cell. And what it does is it just splits in two for that asexual part of its reproduction. Another type is dinoflagellates, right? They're unicellular. They usually have two flagella at right angles to one another. Some are photosynthetic, right? But there are certain species that are heterotrophs. Okay, and so these heterotrophic dinoflagellates are carnivorous, right, parasitic, or mutualistic, meaning they live in a mutual relationship with another organism. So kind of both benefit, right? So one thing we have to watch out for in our world is called algal blooms, right? So when there's a lot of food in the environment, right, lots of sunlight, conditions are favorable, these dinoflagellates actually reproduce in huge numbers. It's called an algal bloom for a reason. And so really what happens is the food all of a sudden diminishes, or the conditions get too harsh, and all of a sudden a large number die. And so these dinoflagellates, or the algae, die. And so the oxygen in the water is actually depleted, and it's suffocating for the fish and other organisms around it. It's usually along the coastline or in the Mississippi River. One thing that we have in the Mississippi River here in the past couple years has been this blue-green algae. It's been a problem during algal blooms. You have to watch out. So usually they post signs, or they'll have it on the news to just be aware of it. And so one thing that I looked up from the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality is that it causes rashes, stomach cramps, nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting if you swim during this algal bloom time. So there's actually toxins in the algae while swimming in it, especially if you ingest some of the water, right, from the algal bloom, that can actually affect your liver and nervous system. So they're talking about, hey, if you catch fish during an algal bloom, be aware that you shouldn't take fish from the affected area, right? And so around here, usually we get these algal blooms due to a lot of heavy rainfall for several weeks. So 2 or 3 weeks of nothing but rain, and we'll have an algal bloom. Okay, so really, what are the signs to look for, especially in the Illinois River or the Mississippi River? Is they look blue, like literally it's blue green paint spilled in the water, maybe a thick, puffy blue, green foam on the surface. Maybe you have swirling colors beneath the surface. Okay. And also, one thing they say you're going to notice is the smell. There's going to be like a grassy, fishy, or like septic odor. Okay. And that came from Illinois.gov. So I found some pictures off of Illinois.gov of one of the signs at the bottom left that they posted. It says swimming area closed. An algal bloom has made this water potentially unsafe for contact. And then the other 3 pictures are some possible algal blooms, right? So you see that blue-green under the water. If you look on the top right, there is some duckweed there, but if you look very close, you're going to see some of that green under the water also. So something to be aware of around here to keep you safe. Okay. Also along the coastline around the oceans, they have what's called red tide. Okay, that's red photosynthetic pigment on these dinoflagellates when they bloom. And so the ocean along that line is actually red. And so that's a specific dinoflagellate. And of course, some of those ones that cause red tide also have a potentially lethal nerve toxin if you end up swimming in that one in the ocean during red time. So usually they try to tape off the shore there or post signs. Then we have euglenas, right? Euglenoids. They contain chloroplasts and they also photosynthesize. You can see the picture of that euglena on the right-hand side. It is also heterotrophic, so it is carnivorous. We also have chrysophytes. These are yellow-green algae or golden brown. And so they have what's called carotenoids that gives them that golden brown color. Okay. That's the pigment, is a carotenoid. So that's what gives it the gold brownish color in the ocean. We also have brown algae, of course, just like it says, brown color. It also has carotenoid pigment that is called phocoxanthin. Okay. And so that pigment, we don't have that around here, but it has most of the 1,500 species of that brown algae are along rocky coasts and, of course, cool areas of the world. Okay, so we do not live on the coast. Then, of course, we get to the green algae, right? So it's very plant-like. We do have that around here. It contains chlorophyll. It is photosynthetic. Okay, these green algae have those cell walls. And most of these species that we do have around here are freshwater, right? So the green algae found in our lakes, rivers, streams, creeks, so forth, so on. In your fish tank, probably. Okay. So some of the different types, right? We have desmids. They are symmetrical. Spirogyra, that is multicellular. It's long, very thin filaments. And Volvox, that is a colony growth pattern, so it builds in colonies. They're green spheres. Okay, so there's kind of the types of algae that we have and the uses that we have, right? So some of these diatoms are cooking oil, sugars, water supplies, separation of waifs, right? So we actually use those for benefiting us. Okay, brown algae you can get in syrups, ice cream, paints, also eaten with meat or fish in soups in certain countries. Okay, same thing with green algae. Okay, usually eaten in some sort of soup or dish. Here's a video on red tides that you can watch on your own. So the cycle of algae, right? So that green algae has what's called the alternation of generations. So pretty much it has 2 generations. One is where it's sexually reproducing and one where it's asexually reproducing, as you see in the picture here, right? So of course it has gametes sexually. It releases gametes into the water. They'll all of a sudden form a zygote when they connect. That zygote will find some place to multiply and put down roots, right? So it'll all of a sudden put down its land somewhere, grow, And then once it hits a certain height or maturity, it will then release spores. Those spores, of course, will be germinating spores, where, of course, once those land somewhere, those will also produce more of the algae, so forth, so on. So that's where we get the idea of alternation of generations. Okay, that pretty much sums up 19.3. Let me know if you have any questions.